Hello, and thank you for joining us tonight for our free webinar, The Value of E-Stim in Unifying Classical and Anatomical Acupuncture Perspectives, featuring Dr. Poney Chiang. My name is Jeff Bloom, Education Marketing Coordinator here at LASA OMS. For over 40 years, LASA OMS has been striving to promote the growth of the acupuncture industry by providing quality products, great prices, and the best customer service, as well as supporting the many schools and continuing education efforts available. With our free webinar series, we intend to provide free educational opportunities taught by some of our industry's most renowned practitioners and educators. I would like to take a moment to acclimate you to the webinar room. We recommend viewing the webinar in Chrome, Firefox, or Safari, as you can experience slowness in other browsers. To the right of the video screen, you will see 3 tabs: Chat, Questions, Polls. To chat with other attendees or to communicate any technical difficulties, please use the Chat tab. For questions, please use the Questions tab to assure that our guest speaker answers them at the end of the lecture. Please note that each webinar is recorded, and immediately following the conclusion, you will receive an email with a link to view the video on demand. We will also share a recording with slides and any other complementary material in the following week or 2 on our blog. You may always visit our blog and use the free webinar tag to find all of our previously recorded events. From sports acupuncture to CBD to practice management, you will find something interesting for every practitioner at the LASA OMS blog. Now for our featured speaker. We are proud to introduce Dr. Poney Chiang. He is an adjunct professor and founder of the Integrative Acupuncture Program for York University in Toronto, and is also a professor at the Neuroacupuncture Institute in Santa Fe. He is an expert in neuroanatomy of acupoints and teaches workshops internationally. He practices in Toronto, Canada, with a focus on dermatology, pain, and nerve rehabilitation. Dr. Poney is the lead author in the upcoming revised edition of Fundamentals of Chinese Acupuncture, co-authoring with Andy Ellis and Nigel Weissman for Paradigm publication. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Chiang.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. The topic of my talk is a little bit ambitious, trying to unify classical and anatomical perspectives. And what I would like to do with you is give you a brief introduction of my research, some of the work I've been done in the last 5 years or so. And I've been very fortunate that people have been very receptive of this material, so much so that I have an opportunity to share this, hopefully in an upcoming textbook, working with Andy Ellis and well-known names like Nigel Weissman. So I'm looking forward to sharing my research with you, and I want to just start by saying that it is simply one perspective, one person's perspective, but I will be happy to share with you why I think in this way, and we're going to have a little bit of fun while we're doing this. Believe it or not, I'm actually going to do a little bit of practical demonstration when I'm doing this, and I'm going to also share with you some advice on how to utilize a pointer plus device. Okay, some of the techniques and things like that you should keep in mind when you use this device, because this tool is very central to my research and is also very central to the way I practice acupuncture in my clinic. So first, to start off, like any good TCM lecture, we need to start with the classics. And what better classic than the Ling Shu? Spiritual Pivot Chapter 10 is entitled Channel Vessel. So already we know right off the bat that this chapter is telling us something about channel pathways, trajectories, and channel theory. And I'm quoting a very precise phrase, a precise verse. The Chinese is written for you for your reference, and I'm only going to be able to read the contents of the slides to you. Due to the limitations of this particular webinar room, I won't be able to use a pointer that you can see as I'm manipulating it. So I have to use a lot of adjectives to try to describe and draw your attention to different parts of the slide. So on the very top of the slide, chapter 10 of this Lin Shu says that the 12 channel vessels course concealed between flesh separations, that is, not visible. So first of all, what are they talking about? What is this flesh separation? If you look at the second last sentence on the bottom of the slide, you'll see that there is 2 Chinese characters. Those Chinese characters is pronounced fin rou. It literally translates as separation flesh, but doesn't make too much sense grammatically in English. So we flip the order and call it flesh separations. And what most scholars believe that the ancients are describing when they use the term fin rou or separation flesh is they're talking about connective tissue planes, in particular intramuscular and intermuscular septums. That is intermuscular or intramuscular septums. So, for example, if you were to just palpate your biceps and brachialis muscle, there's separation between those 2 muscles. That can be considered an intermuscular plane. But if we were to palpate between the 2 heads of the bicep itself, because both biceps are one singular, considered one muscle, then that you're palpating an intramuscular plane. So what this passage is saying is that meridians or channel vessels are concealed between these flesh separations. And sure enough, that is where we learn, for example, long meridian is located. At least imagine lung 3 and 4 on the upper arm is running in between the biceps and brachialis flesh separation, or the intermuscular septum. So now we have to be careful with how we interpret the classic. Okay, if you go back to the very top of the slide again, notice that the seditial pivot doesn't say that the channel vessels are the flesh separations. It tells us that the channel vessels are concealed between flesh separations. So you cannot be something if you're between that something. This channel vessel must be distinct from the flesh separations, and it is also deep and not visible. So let's continue with our journey into the classic and see what other information we can gather about the nature of channel vessels. Next slide comes from chapter 5 of the Ling Shu. The title of the chapter is called Node Puncture, a Puncture Node, True and Evil. And if I could translate that into daily layman's English, it would be something like it'd be similar to the do's and don'ts of needle. Okay, true and evil can be interpreted as orthodox, unorthodox, or the right way or the wrong way, or in English, the do's and don'ts of needling acupuncture nodes / points. So in quotes, he or she who uses needles must first examine the repletion shi and the vacuity shi of the channel and collaterals. Notice in the classic channels, collaterals, jing and mai or jing and lu are used as a compound term. Meridian or channels do not exist in isolation. It is a concept that's married to the concept of vessels or collaterals. Okay, so it's a jing mai or jing lu. Now these jing mai or jing lu you can palpate it and you can follow it. You can press it and you can pluck it, and you can observe some sort of responsive movement. Then you can obtain it and come down on it. Presumably you're coming down with an acupuncture needle, because after all, the title of the chapter is about puncturing with needles. So let's take a look at some of these verbs that are described here about what every acupuncturist ought to be able to do when they're needling. You need to be able to palpate and follow channel of collaterals. You be able to press and pluck it. And so I want to take a minute to analyze these verbs in a little bit more detail. Suppose you have a shiatsu background like me. Before I studied Chinese medicine, my mentors advised that I would become a better acupuncturist if I had some therapy background. So I went to study shiatsu, and I learned the meridian pathways. Shiatsu, in case you're not familiar, is a meridian-based type of acupressure treatment, and so I learned these constructs of where these meridians ought to locate, and I follow along the meridian when I'm applying my finger pressure, right? So that does not require me to be able to necessarily palpate the channel vessel. I'm simply following something that someone told me is there. So now we can press it. The next part, the third verb after palpate and follow is to press it. That's exactly what I'm doing. If I'm applying acupressure, I'm pressing along the meridian. Okay, and then we get into trouble when it comes to word block it. Okay, so unless I'm kind of like kneading, pulling on somebody's skin, okay, and following along the meridian that way, that's not truly palpating something, because in my humble opinion, one can follow along something, even though it's may not physically be there, but if you're told that it's there, you can stay within that course and seemingly follow along something. But if you have to now physically remove something instead of physically pushing into something, you cannot remove something if it's not there. Okay, so what's the significance of this? The significance of this, in my humble opinion, is that Chapter 75 Ling Shu is telling us that channel collaterals are physical entities that you can actually manipulate and separate away from the body. And so that means that the classics, when describing channel collaterals, they're talking about something that's real, not something that is only energetic, that is not palpable. Perhaps something that is physical and energetic at the same time, that one can physically, tangibly interact with. So just to reiterate, if channel vessels are going to be pluckable, then it must have some kind of physical reality. And the topic of our presentation today is based on the anatomical reality of the acupuncture meridian-like structures. So let's look at the picture on the bottom right. What you're looking at is an artistic rendition of the medial aspect of somebody's thigh, in which the white retractors have separated the muscles vastus medialis and the gracilis muscle. So what's revealed between these two muscles is what's called a neurovascular bundle. You'll see there's red for arteries, blue for veins, and the yellow for the nerve, your tricolor neurovascular bundle. And now this could possibly be an example of channel vessels that course beneath flesh separations, right? The vastus medialis and the gracilis are now being separated. That's where the femoral or the flesh separation exists. And the human body evolved in such a way that perhaps in order to save space, they lumped all the vessels and nerves together to travel together. And that is a neurovascular bundle. Okay, it's bundled together in between flesh separations. So one can possibly interpret what chapter 10 of the Ling Shu is saying about the meridians or meridian vessels being in between flesh separation, deep and not visible, could be that they're actually describing neurovascular bundles. Okay, so so just hold on to the idea for now. I'm going to show you a lot of my research that would lend credence to this idea. And I want to say this idea is not new. Everybody, sort of on the gut level, has some appreciation that when you do acupuncture, you're affecting the nervous system. But what I hope to achieve today is that through the research that I'm going to share with you, you're not only going to feel it at the gut level, but you're going to think about it at the intellectual cerebral level. So going back to the notion that if the Jing Luo or Jing Mai is in fact a neurovascular bundle, can we take that a little bit further and say that the Jing of the Jing Mai is the neural part of the neurovascular bundle, and the Mai or Luo of the Jing Mai is the vascular part of the neurovascular bundle. So in English, we even have the same inseparable terminology of the nerves and vessels using together, just like in Chinese classical text, that the meridians are never described separately from the vessels and collaterals. Why am I showing you a slide of the systematic classic, also known as the Zhenjiu Jiayi Jing? Because this is the beginning of my research. I wanted to use the oldest complete acupuncture manual. Most of us would think of the Neijing as the oldest acupuncture or Chinese medicine text. However, it's not considered among scholars to be the first complete manual. To be a complete manual, it means that you would have to have all the points. The Lingshu, in fact, does not describe all the points. This is why the Jiayi Jing, published by the author Huang Fumi in the 259 AD, is given the prestige of being the first complete acupuncture manual, because it is the traditional Chinese medicine to value that which is older, is considered more revered. It made sense that I start with the most ancient complete manual that we have access to today. So let's talk a little bit about what is the Jiayi Jing. The Jiayi Jing has, the full name is actually the Yellow Emperor's 3-volume systematic canon acumoxibustion. And so as the name implies, there are 3 volumes. We already know 2 of those volumes. It is just the Neijing, which is comprised of the Su Wen and the Lingshu. So the 3rd volume is the one that has not been passed down, that's sort of lost, and is passed to indirectly through the Jiayi Jing. Okay? And that volume is called the Bright Hall Cavity Acumoxibustion Treatment Essentials. And the Jiayi Jing describes the location of an additional 189 points that are not mentioned in the Neijing. And in total, it records 349 points. It doesn't just tell us about the location of these points, even it gives us information about how many cones of moxa to apply, how many breaths to retain the needle, and so on and so forth. So this is why it's considered an actual manual. It's not just describing some points without telling you what you're supposed to do with them. So what I set out to do many years ago, it feels like, is that I transliterated the location of the 309 points described in the systematic classic, because I didn't want to rely on other translators' translations, because one of the problems about a translation is that it automatically infuses the translator's interpretation. And I didn't want the possibility that somebody's interpretation, at times of Chinese medicine practitioners, might interpret it a different way. Also, I wanted to create something that somebody that doesn't read classical Chinese can have as close of experience reading Chinese as possible. And so if I give you the translation, which has inherently my interpretation, it takes away your ability to try to interpret yourself. So rather than doing translation, what I've done is called a transliteration, meaning trying to make it as word for word as possible. So if some of the location and passages sounds very cryptic and grammatically strange, that's done intentionally to preserve the essence of reading classical Chinese, because a modern Chinese speaker looking at Chinese classical Chinese will feel that it's a bit awkward, a bit strange. So that's on the Chinese medicine side. And then what I've gone to do, cross-reference the location of these traditional acupuncture points with peer-reviewed surgical research papers. And surgeons are usually very interested in avoiding nerves and things like that, because you don't want to cut those nerves, because that would mean you're going to have a malpractice lawsuit. So they actually have a lot of wonderful papers looking at what is the average nerve pathway for the human being, and try to, so that they can avoid them in the OR. Sometimes these research are incomplete. It does not answer the questions of the point targets I'm investigating. Then I've had to learn how to dissect cadavers myself and apply for bioethic approval and things like that, so I can photo document the dissections findings that I've made, and so then I also confirmed it using channel theory based on the classics. I'll share some with you. If the classic says this meridian branches to 3 different locations, I want to see if the anatomy bears this out. And then finally, okay, of course, we don't work with dead cadavers. We work with live human beings. So there is the final test, okay, as a confirmation, is to confirm the target that I've elucidated by using electricity. So this is why the title of this workshop is use the value of E-Stim to unify the East and West. And when we use electricity on a nerve, and we all know that nerves have evolved to be nature's electricity conductors, we can expect a couple of things when nerves have electricity applied to them. If the nerve is a sensory nerve, it will cause paresthesia or burning, tingling sensation along the path of that nerve, and the path of these nerves have been worked out. So we will be able to determine based on where people feel the sensation, which nerve it is, and specifically down to which branch of the nerve it is. If this nerve is what's said to be a mixed nerve, meaning it has both sensory and motor component, and we apply electricity to it, then the motor fascicles of these nerves will activate, causing contraction of all the downstream muscles that it supplies. So we will be able to confirm through the electricity what type of muscle contraction, or which not sometimes one muscle, but multiple muscles that are innervated by the same nerve can all be recruited, contracted together. And so there we have ways of objectively confirming whether the needle has stimulated the target that we set out to verify. So sorry for all that background information. Now we can finally get to the actual Eastern and Western anatomy comparison. So going right back to chapter 10 of Spiritual Pivot again, I would now like to draw your attention to this paragraph on the long meridian. And the 2 diagrams at the bottom should be familiar to you all. It comes from Navigating the Channels by E-Tian. I apologize, I forgot to put the bibliographical information down there. And so we learn in school that if you look at the diagram on the right, the long stem is the lower point of the long meridian, and it branches to the thenar. And then we learn on the primary channel on the left side, you'll see that the long meridian has a branch in the dot 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 line to the index finger, so they communicate with the large intestine, right? So, but this is based on somebody's interpretation of the classics. In ancient classical text, there's no drawings, at least not the Neijing. So it is just a bunch of Chinese characters. Oftentimes, there's not even any punctuation. The insertion punctuations are actually a modern interpretation in and of itself. So if we can take a look at just the top paragraph, in relation to the long tie-in channel, it tells that it enters the cunkou. Cunkou is the Chinese name for the cunkou mai, which is the radial styloid pulse. It goes up the fish. Okay, so what is a fish? Well, you have to know that the Chinese name for long 10 is yu yao, fish waist. So so if it goes to my apology, fish border yu ji. So if it goes to the fish, it means talking about it goes to thenar. So fish is simultaneously a term specifically for long 10, but also is a general term for the part of the body that we in English we call the thenar. It exits at the tip of the large finger. Okay, so what's the large finger? Probably the thumb is the largest finger because it doesn't tell us that it's the thumb. Its branch exits behind the wrist, and behind the wrist directly exit the inner surface of the second finger at its tip. So the second finger is probably the index finger. Okay, so that's how we derive at the picture on the left that this meridian enters the styloid radial pulse area. Okay, and then it goes to the long 10, the fish. Okay, and then it goes to the large finger, the thumb, and it goes to the second finger, the index finger. So therefore, that's the connection of the lung and the large intestine. In the same paragraph, they don't in the same chapter, they don't just tell us about the primary channels, they also tell about the secondary channels, in particular the lower channels. And so in the second paragraph on the screen, you'll see that it says the hand-tying separation. Separation, it oftentimes in the classic is how they refer to collaterals or laws. They say that the separation is named Lang 7. Okay, the name of the point is Lie Chue. And it starts between the separation above the wrist. It merges the tying channel, directly enters the palm, and it scatters into Lang 10. Right? So, or the fish border. So this is how we know that the Lang lower point is supposed to reach the thenar region. Now, there's a couple of things I want to point out here. It says that this meridian starts between the separation above the wrist. This is the same separating character that we saw in the very beginning when we talked about flesh separation. Okay, so the first separation in the sentence here, hand-tying separation, is a different character. So it's not the same character as the flesh separation. Maybe it would be better if I said that hand tying diverges, so that there's less confusion about what I'm talking about the separation. But the latter part of the sentence, when they talk about the separation above the wrist, is the same separation fin character as the flesh separation we saw earlier. Okay, so once again, we see that there's a constant allusion to the idea that the meridian have to be somewhere between separations. Now, what you're looking at here is a dissection of the superficial radial branch, okay, superficial branch of the radial nerve. Okay, so you can, unfortunately, I don't have control of a cursor, so you have to follow along as I'm trying to describe this. First, draw your attention to the circle labeled Lang 7. Okay, and if you shift your eyes to the right, you'll see there's an arrow A and B. Right, so that superficial branch of the radial nerve is merging between the two tendons A and B, which is not so important right now. It happens to be brachioradialis and extensor carpi radialis longus. But what's remarkable is that the Ling Shu is telling us that this point emerges from a separation, which is a flesh separation, okay, or a sinew separation. And indeed, it appears to be describing the superficial branch of the radial nerve emerging between these two tendons. And then, if you can follow along the arborization, or sometimes I call it the ramification of the nerves, you'll see that there are branches that are called the medial branch of the SVR. The medial branches, if you follow along, goes towards the index finger, right? So that's the large intestine meridian described in the classics. And then if you follow along the arrow that's at the lateral branch of the SBRN, you'll see that the lateral branch further divides, bifurcates, and one of them is labeled for you called the branch to the thenar. The branch to the thenar is what you expect to be the lower meridian, because we are told by the Ling Shu that Lang 7, being the lower point, scatters in the fish border, right? So it scatters in the thenar. So far, it would appear that the classics are bang on with the neuroanatomy. So the only final branch that we have yet to describe is the branch, is the remaining branch from the lateral branch of the superficial branch. So one of them was the thenar branch. So the other one goes towards the lip space on the thumb side. So there you have a completion of all three branches. And so I want to take this opportunity to introduce the plot that we talked about earlier in chapter 75. Okay, so I'm going to shift the camera down, okay, and so that you can see my hand, okay, and the plot. If I drag my finger across, I want you to see if you can see a subtle change in the shade. Looks like there's a gummy worm that is moving under my skin. There it is. Do you see it? Here it comes. There's a focus over here. Okay, just as the classic said, the style of 寸口. Yeah. When I let go, there is something that slides over. Focus on this area, okay? There it is, it moves across. What I've been doing there is I'm neuropalpating. That is what is described in the classic as plucking the nerve, okay? So this, so far we've seen evidence of the classic talking about the ability to palpate a meridian. We can see that the channel theory that's described in chapter 10 of the Ling Shu also to be very precisely discussing the details of the peripheral nervous system. Now I'm going to bring in the pointer plus into all this, okay? So first of all, the pointer plus has, this is the basic model, okay? Has a couple of things I want you to be aware of. There is an SCN setting, and then there's a INT for intensity. SCN is for sensitivity and INT for intensity. The SCN, when you turn on the device and you press down on the button, it makes a high pitched noise. Okay? It's meant to help people that don't know acupuncture points how to find them, because the pitch will change once the probe gets close to the acupuncture point. For our purpose, we've spent tens of thousands of dollars to study acupuncture, which hope you know where the points are. So we don't need that function. So sensitivity goes to 0. What we do want to work on is the intensity, and the intensity also happens to be the on-off switch. Okay, so once you click it, we use different intensities depending on we're working on sensory nerves or mixed nerves, which is, as you recall, a mixture of sensory and motor nerves. The superficial branch of the radial nerve is strictly a sensory nerve. So if I move on to the next slide, I give you a little bit of information on how to use the pointer plus device to locate sensory nerves. First thing you need to do, okay, is you want to set the intensity, as the second bullet says in the slide, to be between 2 and 4, okay? And the first point on the slide says you apply lotion. If you use something that's water-based, oil and alcohol type of stuff, or sanitizers and things like that don't work very well. Okay, oil doesn't conduct, has not enough water content, so does not conduct electricity very well. And so here I got a little bit of hand lotion. I'm going to apply it to my lung 7 area. Okay, if you happen to have one of these pointer plus devices, feel free to join along. Okay, I am applying the lotion to the hand sanitizer area, and sorry, to my wrist area, and I wanted to just show you how slow one needs to. Let me see if I can make this box bigger here. 1 second. I'm trying to see if I can make this video bigger. There it is. Okay. All right. So let me do that again about the plucking in case you couldn't see it earlier. Okay. So watch this area and see how you'll actually see like a gummy worm slide across right there. Okay. Something right here. Watch. There's something that's moved in the skin. That is the superficial branch of the radial nerve being manipulated. So knowing where it is, we're going to use the pointer plus. Okay, now the pointer plus also has this metal contact. Okay, and it actually has a hole on the bottom that gets connected to a grounding bar. So if you are using a grounding bar, then your partner is holding to that bar. So therefore, there's a connection between you and your partner. But if you don't have a grounding bar, you have to serve as the connection. So your supporting hand, your mother hand, has to be on the patient when you're doing this, okay? But when you're on yourself, it doesn't matter because you are your own internal circuit. So what I want to show you, okay, is how slow you need to move this probe along so that you can feel the sensations into each of these 3 branches, okay? So you depress the button on top, you'll see a green light come on that tells you that the battery is working and electricity is being emitted at the tip. Okay, and you're gonna feel a little bit of numbness, tingling sensation in your skin, but that sensation does not propagate into the fingers. What you're looking for is a sensation as you move from radial to ulna, sensation that's go first into the large intestinal meridian, then go into the lung meridian, then go into the lower thenar meridian. Okay, the way the nervous system is compartmentalized is exactly as it is bundled inside the trunk itself. So I know you can obviously cannot feel what I'm feeling, but I can describe it to you so you can appreciate the speed and the slowness that one needs to do this. So I'm just moving it along. I'm not feeling anything yet, and as I approach the nerve, I'm starting to feel a little bit something in my index finger. I feel a little bit in sort of large intestine 4 area, but it's going to no doubt going to my index finger. And if I continue moving it in the ulnar direction, I start to feel the entire thumb and index finger lighting up. So the first web space is completely lighting up between these two fingers now. Now, if I continue further, I now lose the sensation in the index finger. I still retain the sensation in the thumb. And if I continue even more, I lose sensation in the thumb, and I begin to feel some sensation in the thenar aspect of the thumb. Okay, so just to show you how slowly one needs to move this across. Okay, so if you were to just move it across really quickly like that, it's going to be so fast that your nervous system won't be able to detect it, and it's going to be so fast that your patient wouldn't be able to give you any feedback. Okay. So let me jump back to our regular slide setting. Jeffrey, if you can help me with that. Okay, so that's the third point. We want to move the probe very slowly. Okay, and when you're working on another person, your mother hand or your holding hand can feel an increase in the feedback. What the feedback means is the electricity that you're picking up in your mother hand. Okay. Now I know some people don't like that feeling, but so they prefer the grounding bar. When you do the patient holds the grounding bar, then the practitioner doesn't need to touch the patient. You don't have that feeling, but you're still going to get a little bit of feedback from this metal contact plate. Okay. So the electricity is coming out from this plate into your thumb. Okay. And then being connected. Okay. In a circle. And I prefer the non-grounding bar method. I prefer to use my own hand as the grounding because it gives me very valuable information. When the pointer plus tip approaches the nerve, suddenly there'll be an increase in feedback. So that tells me that I'm getting close. Okay, I'm about to get really, really close to the nerve I'm looking for. So and then if I went too far, I lost the feedback. I know, oh, I went far, and I got to come back to find the nerve again, and suddenly the feedback increases. So this actually, the feedback or the mother hand gives me valuable information about what direction and what speed I should be applying this pointer plus device. Okay. And as you move slowly along, okay, imagine if the nerve is like this, and I'm moving the probe along. If I run across a probe, it's going to feel as if I'm running over a speed bump. So oftentimes there is going to be a physical sensation of a raise and drop that alerts you that you cross the nerve and you come back to it. Not all nerves are going to be palpable. Okay, as you know, the extent of the adipose tissue on each patient, sometimes you can or cannot palpate it. But with this device, it's really helpful for you to really confirm the location. And then if you are going to then stimulate this point/nerve target, of course, we don't want to put the needle inside the nerve. We want to put the needle just adjacent to the nerve so that we can introduce electricity. Or in ancient times, there was no electricity, so they would have done a lot of needle manipulation techniques, 9 different needle manipulation techniques, create vibration that can then, or mechanical transduction that can cause a sensation to be propagated and felt as meridians. And so, if you were to be using this for different specific purposes, sometimes the patient might have a nerve irritation or nerve entrapment only at specific branches of that nerve. With this device, you can get feedback from the patient that they're in fact feeling paresthesia and numbness exactly where they're experiencing their natural paresthesia, so that you know that you really targeted and found and replicated this side of the problem. And then you apply electricity to de-irritate that nerve. Right? But it's a little bit beyond the scope of this presentation. Now, another point that I want to talk about is heart 5, because it too, just like lung 7, is a low point. And one of the most exciting things for me when I was doing this research is that I have found that all the low points do exactly as the channel theory dictates, that as a low point it's supposed to connect interior and exterior. So for the lung 7 low point, we know that it connects the lung and large intestine, right? So for what's the low point of the heart channel is heart 5, and heart 5 is supposed to connect with its interior exterior, which is the small intestine. So now let's take a little bit of take a look at the ulnar nerve on the ulnar aspect of the hand. The picture on the just reminds everybody where small intestine 5 and small intestine 4 is located. Because if you look at the picture over on the right, you'll see that there's the white arrow on the that's the one that's called dorsal cutaneous branch. It wraps over small intestine 5, small intestine 4, and that dorsal cutaneous branch is a branch of which nerve? Okay, if you look at the small arrow on the bottom, okay, of the right photograph, it's coming the ulnar nerve. So the ulnar nerve could be thought of as the heart meridian, and from heart 5 splits towards splits, and the nomenclature changes to dorsal cutaneous branch, and then it makes its trajectory to the dorsal aspect of the hand to innervate the dorsal aspect of the medial 1.5 fingers, and that becomes the small intestine. Right? So it's a perfect example that the lower meridian is actually anatomically true, anatomically real. Okay? And with sufficient practice, you can actually learn to pluck this dorsal cutaneous branch as well. Okay. Here's a picture of the dissection. Just to help orient everybody, the bottom of the slide is the hand. Okay, so it's distal, and the asterisk that you're seeing there is the ulnar styloid. Okay, so imagine my hand is kind of in this position. Okay, and first thing you'll see, let's take a look at the point heart 4 on the very top of the slide. So heart 4 is the ulnar nerve trunk, and when it divides into the dorsal cutaneous branch, we have the point heart 5. Funny thing is that heart 5 actually further divides, which very precisely distributes over small intestine 5 and small intestine 6. And so these two points 5 and 6 are actually also pluckable areas for these nerves. Okay. So we're going to take a little departure from the lower points now, and we're going to talk about some of the points on the form, which is not entirely true because the triple energizer 5, which I'm going to talk about, is still considered a low point. But for some reason, the classic doesn't actually describe where the low point of triple energizer 5 ought to go to. Okay, it doesn't actually say that it's supposed to be the hand drain. It doesn't say that. Okay, so from a purely classical standpoint, triple energizer 5 is not a low point because it doesn't describe where it should go. But I want to show you this slide because not everything is necessarily about nerves and vessels. There are little exceptions. But it doesn't take away the main message that acupuncture points are very precise anatomical targets. Okay? What I want to show you first is just familiarize yourself with the anatomy of this region. So you can see the various muscles on the forearm, the red, green, yellow, and purple, and the the names of these muscles are indicated by the black lines. So for example, the purple muscle is the abductor pollicis longus, okay? But right above abductor pollicis longus on my slide, you'll see everything else triple energizer 8. I want to point out that triple energizer 8 is not where the lines are pointing to, okay? It's where the blue dot is on that corresponding color muscle. And so if you look at where the blue dots are located, they are where, based on 2 measurements that are passed on in classic, where the points should be located. Okay? And another reason why I'm showing you this slide is that this is actually a walk down memory lane for me. My research began here on this slide. Right? When I looked at the points Sanjiao 5, 6, 7, and 8, and I asked myself, why the heck do you have so many points in such a tiny square inch area? You know, I have read that sinologists, these are sources of Chinese culture, consistently conclude that the Chinese culture is very pragmatic. And so if that were true, if these points all do the same thing, it would not be very pragmatic to pass down 4 things that do the same thing. So I can only conclude that if these 4 points have survived to this day, they must all serve individual purpose. And that's when I took out the anatomy book and I looked at these muscles in the area and I asked the bold question, could it be possible that these points each affect a very specific, distinct muscle? And to answer that question, I had to needle myself. And the pointer plus came in. I needled myself, applied pointer plus, and observed if the muscles moved the index finger for the extended indices, for the thumb, that can be whether it's a longest or brevis extensor or abduction. And my jaw dropped. I realized that ancient people passed on these points for a very precise reason. I want to share with you what that looks like in the next dissection here. This is a paper that was published with an associate of mine in medical acupuncture, and what we have shown here on the top is acupuncture needles inserted into acupuncture points, and we're able to demonstrate that by preserving the Sun relationship of these points from that's described in the classic, we can actually put the needle into very specific muscles. So on the bottom slide, you'll see that there's one muscle that's cut. That muscle is the extensor digitorum longus. Okay, also extensor digitorum communis, or EDC for short. It's written on the bottom. It says reflected extensor digitorum communis. So that is reflected so that you can see what the heck the needles are actually needling. Firstly, let's draw your attention back to the slide on the photo on the top. Okay, look at the point that's on the most right, this triple energizer 9, TE9. That needle is directly in extensor digitorum communis itself. Okay? And then once you reflect extensor digitorum communis, you'll see that the needles precise insert into the precise muscles that I've shown in the previous slide. And so this is simply just for convince a skeptic and show that really is in where these muscles ought to be. Unless you have experience working in cadavers and be able to recognize specific muscles in this picture, unfortunately, because I don't have control of an indicator to point it to you, it looks like they're in random places, right? So this is why there's a need to actually do it on a live person. And this is what that looks like when we use a pointer plus device. So what I'm going to show you now is the consequence of applying electricity needle into Sanjiao 5, triple energizer 5. And the top picture on the top left corner actually comes from a textbook or a website that teach physiatrists how to do electromyography, and look at where they indicate to stimulate extensor indices. One look at that, you would realize that that's the same thing as Sanjiao 5. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play the video that's on the bottom, and you'll be able to see that when the pointer plus is applied to Sanjiao 5, you get a very clean extension of the index finger. Okay, I'm going to play that video again because it's too fast. Okay, Now, the extensor indicis muscle is a very fine muscle. It's actually slightly more on the ulnar side. So, but on the picture over here, you can see that it is very consistent with where we would needle it in real practice. So, why is it then that when you look at the picture I first showed you over here on this slide, that it would appear as if a Sanjiao 5 or triple angina 5 is more on the ulnar side, a little bit more ulnar deviated. Okay, so I quickly realized as I was doing research that you cannot trust anatomy books because the anatomy illustrator's purpose and our purpose is not the same thing. Anatomy illustrator's purpose is to show all the structure of the human body in that region. And if that structure is deep to something else, in a two-dimensional medium like paper, you cannot show a three-dimensional concept. So they have to be clever and deviate of certain structure so that it can be revealed. So don't rely on your typical anatomy textbook to learn the three-dimensional relationship of muscles, particularly if it's deep to something else, because oftentimes it'll be lateral immediately skewed. So this is why there is a need to go to primary source papers, so, which are usually photographs from cadavers that's a bit more precise. Now I'm going to show you a video for simulating Sanjiao 6, 7, and 8. Okay, now in the notes you'll see that over here on the left, Sanjiao 6 corresponds to the extensor pollicis brevis, Sanjiao 7 extensor pollicis longus, and Sanjiao 8 corresponds to abductor pollicis longus. Don't worry about what specific muscle of the thumb that these points correspond to. That will become important when you actually use this in clinic. Today we're talking about just getting across the idea that acupuncture points are very precise anatomical entities. Okay, so just look at the thumb in the video, which I'm going to play shortly, and see how the thumb moves in different planes. One plane goes towards you, okay, one plane away from you, and then one plane to your left. Okay, so it moves in 3 different vectors. Okay, I'm going to get the video ready. Okay, so in this point, Sanjiao 8, you see the thumb is going towards the massage table. Then Sanjiao 7, the thumb is moving towards us. Okay, and then Sanjiao 6, the thumb is moving to my left. Demonstrating that these points target independent, distinct muscles, and thereby creating completely different planes of movement. Okay, so I'm seeing some comments coming in. People are saying very cool, and that imagine when I was doing this for the first time. This is where all this research began. These exact points with the pointer plus device. I couldn't have done it without the pointer plus device. Okay, and saw very distinct movements in the thumb and the index finger, and I realized that how come I didn't learn this in school? How come nobody told me that acupuncture points are really an immaculate map that the ancients passed down to us so that we can make people's limbs animate however we want, okay? Had I known that, maybe I would have been more interested in acupuncture than herbal medicine at the time. Okay, moving on to the next topic. What you're looking at here is liver 8 and kidney 10. And so this is the standard point location you see. We learned in school, we learned that kidney 10 is located in between the semimembranosus and semimembranosus. And then and liver 8 is located between gracilis and semimembranosus. Okay, but as I started to do research into the classics, doing all this transliteration I was talking about, nowhere in the classics did they actually mention semimembranosus, semitendinosus, right? So who decided that what structure does describe, which stimulus, okay, was described in the classic, is semitendinosus or semimembranosus, right? Like how was that made? Like, did they take a vote? Okay, did they handle Chibo and ask for permission? Like, how did they do this? Let's take a look at what it says in the classics, okay? But before we do that, we need to be reminded of what it says in the modern times so that you can have compare and contrast, okay? So I'm not going to read both of them. I'm just going to read Kidney 10, okay? So Kidney 10, it says that, this is from Chen Xinlong, the CAM book, Orange book, says that when the knee is flexed, the point is on the medial side of the popliteal fossa between the tendon of the muscle semitendinosus and semimembranosus at the level of bladder 40, okay? So, but then I'm going to jump to the next slide. You're going to take a look and see what it actually says in the classic. And when I say classic, in this case, it's not the Jia Jing, is a spiritual pivot, so even older. As I mentioned, spiritual pivot doesn't describe all the points, but when it does, you better use the one for spiritual pivot, because otherwise your TCM ancestor will be rolling in their grave, because that'd be blasphemy to quote a younger classic according to the values of Chinese medicine. So the oldest classic we have is the Ling Shu, and when it comes to acupuncture. And so this is what it says. It says that it's located behind the secondary bone, below the large muscle, above the small muscle, located by pressing, okay, obtained with the knees bent, okay? So no indication of semimembranosus and semimembranosus. It simply talks about a large muscle and a small muscle. So we have a problem. We have to decide on which is a large muscle, which is a small muscle, okay? So going back to the notion that Chinese culture, according to most sinologists, is a very highly practical culture, one would assume that the information here is not going to be very cryptic, because if you're an author, you want to pass information on for posterity, you would probably make this information very intuitive and not very hard to understand. So if they say that there's a large muscle, it will probably be the largest muscle and the one that you're not likely to confuse it with another muscle. Okay, so let's take a look at the medial aspect of the knee here in this central black and white diagram. And I'm not going to say anything. I just want you to take a look at it for a second on your own. Okay, and take a look at at the medial aspect of the thigh here. What would be the largest muscle? Okay, and I've talked many times before. I invariably get the answer that I agree with from the audience, is that if you want to look at this at a quick glance, even without knowing the names of the muscles, you would know that the biggest muscle is the one that's right in the middle, okay, and it happens to be the sartorius, okay. So if that were to be true, then kidney 10 would have to be between the sartorius and the small muscle beside it, okay. So the small muscle that's beside it would have to be the gracilis. In other words, this is challenging the notion that kidney 10 is located beneath semimembranosus and semimembranosus in favor of the interpretation that the point is located between sartorius and gracilis. Okay. Now, one would not truly ever know what the ancients are thinking when they were looking at describing the structures. Your guess is as good as mine. But what if I told you, based on the precise information I've shown you so far, and of course, due to the limitation of time, I cannot possibly show you my research for all the points, but hopefully you've seen enough to start appreciate that a lot of these points are very precisely located on nerves. And with that in mind, if the spiritual pivot location being between sartorius and gracilis is a place where a nerve emerges, while the location between semitendinosus and semimembranosus doesn't have a nerve immersion there, which one do you think is more likely to be what the ancient authors are trying to describe? So then what is that nerve? That nerve is called the saphenous nerve. We've all had personal, intimate experience with the saphenous nerve. The last time that you got a needle in spleen 9 and felt a zing down the leg, you can thank the saphenous nerve. Okay, so we've all had personal experience with the saphenous nerve. Spleen 9 is further down on the leg, definitely below the knee line. Kidney 10 is the same nerve, but it's actually where the nerve exits the fascia. So it's a fascial exit point. I'm going to show you some pictures about that, dissection picture about that on the upcoming slide. But before I do that, I want to draw your attention to liver 8. Okay, so if you take a look at the left here, the left side, it says that liver 8 is located below the secondary bone, above the large muscle, and your pain again attended by the knees bent. So just a quick word about what the secondary bone is. Okay, if you look at the third Chinese character, the character Fu, okay, is the character that's translated as secondary, and secondary means it's relation to something that's primary. So in the context of the knees, that's bony. Assuming that people were doing this by palpatory anatomy, they didn't have imaging techniques and things like that. So it would be an obvious primary knee bone, which I think is probably the patella, the kneecap, that's right in the center, the primary, and the assistants or the secondary ones are flanking, which would be the medial condyles or lateral condyles of the femur. Okay, so this is telling us that this point is located below the condyle, okay, but it's located above the large muscle. So if you look at the curvature of the sartorius muscle, making a little bit A shape, okay, towards the anterior aspect of the tibia, you can see that by putting the liver 8, what I indicated with the green circle, still considered above that muscle, okay, and yet being simultaneously below the condyle at the same time. So it's possible to place that point that is consistent with the classic and be over another nerve. And that nerve, if you look at the diagram, tells you it's called the inferior patellar branch of the saphenous nerve. The inferior patellar branch of the saphenous nerve. Okay, so I like to think that this interpretation actually is, just a pun on the topic of the presentation today about unification, and not necessarily just unifying East and West. How about unifying the different Asian locations of liver 8? Everybody, Japanese, Vietnamese, Chinese have different locations of liver 8, but people say, no, it has to be on the joint line. Some people say, no, all the Hussey joints has to be below the joint line, right? So it cannot be above the joint line. But some traditions say, no, it's above the joint line because my master says so. Well, they're all correct because it's possible to put that point on this inferior patellar branch of the saphenous nerve, and as long as you're on that nerve, you can be above the joint line or below the joint line. It's all correct. As long as you do what chapter 75 the classic tells you to do, you pluck the channel and then you put the needle where you feel the neurovascular. So here's the dissection that I promised to show you. You're looking at the medial aspect of somebody's left knee here, okay? And so sorry about the disorientation, it's a bit different from the black and white picture. That was somebody's right knee. Let's take a look at the muscle labeled A. See how that's the biggest muscle compared to B and C, right? So that's the sartorius, and then so B is the gracilis. So in between A and B, we have kidney 10. That's where the saphenous nerve emerges, right? And then if you look at where D4 is on the right, you can imagine that is the direction towards spleen 9. So when you got needle in spleen 9, you got the zing. If you look at the blue tab at the level of the arrow for D3, so find D3 on the right, see how there's an arrow, and then there's a blue tab about the same level as the arrow for D3. That's approximately spleen 9. So if you needle onto that, you get a zing down the leg. That's a saphenous nerve. Okay, but so I'm just orienting you to what you already know. But let's take a look at liver 8. Liver 8 is one of two inferior patellar branches. There's the D2, okay, and D3. There's two different inferior patellar branches, and the liver 8 just happens to be the more superior of the two. Okay, so I hope that gives you some flavor and appreciation of just how precise ancient acupuncturists were. They were really acute anatomists. Okay, well, they passed on this information and they didn't leave any branches unassigned. Every single meticulous branch has been assigned to us, which means that they knew about every single one of these precise branches. Okay, moving further down the leg now, that's our attention to kidney 3. And you'll see on the bottom corner, there are Chinese characters in English letters in red, okay? And so what I wanted to draw your attention to is the pulsation vessel. The modern locations, such as manual acupuncture, the location is showing you on the top left, doesn't mention anything about pulsation vessels when palpating or needling this point. But clearly from the systematic classic, pulsation vessel is important. So what is this pulsation? Let's look at the colorful drawing on the bottom left here. You see there's a neurovascular bundle. You see that the arrow, the labeling shows you there's a tibial nerve and artery, right? So that together is a neurovascular bundle. And so when the systematic classic tells us that when we locate kidney 3, we're palpating a pulsation, it's basically telling us that you're palpating a neurovascular bundle, especially in light of the fact that we have other parts of the classic, such as Lin Shu 75, tell you that there's something that's blockable. Okay, so meridians, channel vessels, and jingmai are physical structures. Okay, sure, they can have an energetic component, but the fact that it's something that's pulsating and pluggable tells us that ancient acupuncturists and ancient acuanatomists were interfacing with something tangible, right? And that's the connection between the anatomical world and the traditional acupuncture channel theory world. Here is a preview of the type of picture you'll see from my textbook. What you're looking at here is the structures, target or branches for kidney 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, so again, the quick review of the points by looking at the picture on the top right, you'll see that kidney 6 is located below the medial malleolus, and kidney 3, 4, 5, 6 makes a little bit of a circle. I call it like a roller coaster. Okay, so if you didn't know about the anatomy and you simply connect the dots, you would naturally draw the circular movement and be led to think that the meridian does a circular eddy like that. Okay, but once you understand what's actually going on in the anatomy and why they have these points located precisely in those locations, it might change the way you think about these points, but not in a way that takes away the mystique of acupuncture. For me, at least, it makes me the more excited and amazed how ancient people possibly knew this. Okay, there are branches of nerves that, in my research, that Western medicine has yet to describe, and up to, let's say, maybe 10 years ago, and acupuncture points have already been assigned there. And I just needed to wait a couple of years before that research was available. But I already knew that was going to be discovered because our ancient acupuncture anatomy ancestors already told us that was there. Okay, so sorry, I'm getting kind of excited. So I'm going to calm myself back down a little bit, okay? And then go back to the bottom left picture over here. So we were just talking about kidney 3. So if you look at the top of the colorful photograph, posterior to the asterisk, which is the medial malleolus, we have kidney 3. So you see in red, that's the posterior tibial artery. So that is the neurovascular bundle together with the posterior tibial nerve. So in total, it's called the posterior tibial neurovascular bundle. And then the posterior tibial nerve trifurcates into kidney 4, 5, and 6. Each one of these are known anatomical ramifications. So the tibial nerve, kidney 4 happens to be what they call the medial calcaneal nerve because it covers the medial aspect of the calcaneus. Kidney 5 is the lateral plantar nerve, and kidney 6 is the medial plantar nerve. Every single branch that there was a point specifically described. So once you see this, it's really hard to try to doubt yourself and say that acupuncture does not have an anatomical basis. And this is my humble, secret agenda that this information would keep on more widely known. So hopefully it would take away some ammunition of skeptics that say that acupuncture is all hokey pokey and not based on reality. Okay, it's clearly based on reality. It's based on anatomy, just like I'm standing right in front of you today. So I want to show you what happens when you electrically stimulate kidney 5, which your notes will tell you that it's the lateral plantar nerve. And but before I do that, let's do a bit of quick review of the meridian theory and also the innervations of the lateral plantar nerve. So in the picture on the left here, you'll see kidney 1 is the first point on the on the bottom of the foot. But we learned that kidney meridian actually doesn't start at kidney 1. Kidney meridian starts at the toe, right? So now look at the central diagram. Okay, you're looking at the plantar aspect of the foot, and the muscle labeled ADM is abductor digiti minimi. So its job is the abduct. It's the oops, I can do it. It's the abduct the baby toe. Okay, so now take a look at the video. I'm going to show you what happens when you electrically stimulate kidney 5. Okay, and you'll see that the baby toe is abducting. Okay, so I'll do that again. it is conceivable that when acupuncturists, okay, were needling the medial aspect of the ankle, one more time, that they observed the patient could have felt paresthesia in the baby toe, but that would have been enough to deduce that there must be a meridian that connected the medial aspect of the ankle and the baby toe. But it's also possible that when you needle it, you would have saw a subtle flinching, okay, of the toe, and have without the understanding of the anatomy, determine that this could be some kind of force or a power that connected what I'm seeing on the baby toe with where my needle is located on the medial aspect of the foot. Okay, so but we know now what they were describing is actually the lateral plantar nerve, okay, whose distribution is precisely connecting from the baby toe to the medial aspect of the ankle. Okay. All right, so I hope we're starting to get catch on to this trend. I'm going to speed up a little bit so that we can finish it on time and have time for some questions. So again, so now let's move away from the arms and feet. I'm going to show what about the body? What about the face? Is this just true for the arms and leg? We have examples on the torso, such as gallbladder 22, that talks about pulsation. And sadly, these information is not preserved in modern teachings about the location gallbladder 22. Okay, so if you look at the top right image over here, you'll see that the vessel that we're talking about is called the thoracodorsal artery, and it travels together with the nerve called thoracodorsal nerve, which is just right above it. And it's a neurovascular bundle. So anytime you see a pulsation described location, they are plucking or palpating neurovascular bundles. Okay, gallbladder 23 is very close to gallbladder 22, and there was also one of those aha moments when I ask, well, if these points are affecting the intercostal nerve, then there's only one intercostal space there. Why would you need to have 2 points for one intercostal space? Surely, cynologists tell us that they're practical. So if they were both innervating, let's say the 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth intercostal nerve, that wouldn't be very practical, would it? Right? So it turns out that they were targeting. In the picture, you can see on the top right, thoracodorsal nerve and long thoracic nerve. See how the two nerves come down vertically? They are coming off the brachial plexus, and they precisely have 1.5 student relationship relative to each other. So in the video I'm going to show you, you're going to see the consequence of using a pointer plus to stimulate these 2 points. The first point being stimulated is the long thoracic nerve, which innervates the serratus anterior. The second point that's being stimulated now is the thoracodorsal nerve, which innervates the latissimus dorsi. First one here, again, is the long thoracic for serratus anterior, so you can see the arm moving forward. Now this is thoracodorsal, which innervates the lats, and you have a downward rolling action. Okay, one more time. Long thoracic for serratus anterior going forward. That's gallbladder 23, gallbladder 22, thoracodorsal. It's effective. The thoracodorsal innervates the latissimus, and it has a downward movement. So notice how close those 2 points are located to one another, but it's a complete different reality when you actually stimulate it. Okay, so this just again lends credence to the notion that ancient acupuncturists weren't messing around. Okay, they passed down 2 points for very good reasons. Okay, so apologize for the slide shuffle. It goes into the beginning. Okay, so here's the same thing I've just described in more of a pictorial format. Okay, gallbladder 23 and gallbladder 22. The top of the slide shows you what nerves they belong to, what muscles those nerves affect, and the dissection image on the bottom right show you how close the long thoracic nerve is in relation to the thoracodorsal nerve. So if you were to continue down the side of the body, okay, you will be able to isolate the stimulation of those two nerve structures. Okay, small intestine 4. we're going back to the hand, and I wanted to show you this as an example of no nerve branch is spared. Okay, no nerve branch is left unassigned, to really drive the point home that acupuncture really is nerve stimulation. Because why else would it be just the right amount of points for the right number of branches of these nerves? So let's take a look at the dissection on the bottom right. What you're seeing here is the ulnar nerve. Okay, as you can see, the branches are going towards the ring and pinky finger, and you'll see a silver probe that's coming up from the lower part of the hypothenar. That trajectory is meant to stimulate the direction of needling small intestine 4. Okay, now look at where that probe is located. Okay, supporting, not the tip of the probe, but where the probe is supporting. You'll see that there's actually 3 nerves, right? 2 of them are longer, they go towards the fingers, right? So they go to the pinky and ring finger. But the third one that is deeper and dives down. Okay? Now let's take a look at the black and white picture on the top right now. Okay, if you'll see that there is something called superficial branch of deep. A superficial branch, okay, and there's something that's called a deep branch, right? If you follow a superficial branch, see how it branches into 2, right? So that's what we see in the bottom. And then there's one that's deep and plunges, that's the deep branch. And in fact, the deep branch actually curves, in the picture on top, curves to the right. It actually curves towards what's called the adductor pollicis. This is the muscle that allows you to adduct your thumb. So it means that the nerve actually crosses the hand, and in so doing it raises all the interosseous muscles that allow you to do abduction and adduction, and it ends up in the thumb as well, like this. Okay, so I wanted to show you this video, okay, just to show you that they even pass down the point to affect this deep motor branch, and that is achieved through small intestine 4 alone. Okay, so in this video, you'll see that there's flickering of the fingers. That's due to the interosseous muscles innervated by the deep branch and ulnar nerve. Then once I send the stimulation, see how the thumb starts to come towards the palm? And if we really hold it, then opposition happens. Okay, so that is because the thenar and hypothenar, okay, actually the adductor pollicis and the hypothenar muscles are all converging. Right, so they even pass down the deep motor branch, and in a way that's relatively comfortable to stimulate from the side as opposed to from the thenar directly. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna go this one more time. Okay, okay, and the last one. Okay, the last one, finish up with the face. Let's bring a little bit of channel theory to this. So back to chapter 10 of the spiritual pivot. If you look at the top right text, it says that the small intestine channel has a branch that separates on the cheeks and arrives at the nose, reaches the inner eye corner, and diagonally wraps the cheekbone. Okay? It is based on these cryptic texts that modern educators created a drawing on the left that shows you that there's a point that is on the level of the cheekbone, okay, that there is a reaching towards the inner eye corner, so that's the ... line. Okay, so if you look at the inner canthus of the picture on the left, how there's a triangle there, right? There's a ... that connects that with small intestine 18. That is because the classic from chapter 10 tells us that it reaches the inner eye corner, okay? So then we draw this picture that way. And that's kind of what the traditional indications of these points are. Sometimes it was helpful. Sometimes it's helpful to look at not just the channel pathway that's described in the classic to cross-reference what's being stimulated, but if the classic tells us what diseases it treats, that can also help us figure out what nerves would be involved that then confirms what is the target that we're trying to stimulate. So if you look at one of the functions of small intestine 18 according to Denman's textbook, if you look at the bottom left under the comment section, it says small intestine 18 has among its indications the ability to treat twitching the eyelid. Okay, so how can we reconcile this? Okay, take a look at the following slide. The answer is in the anatomy. So this picture comes from a paper published in the Journal of Craniofacial Surgery in 2006, which in the grand scheme of things is relatively recent. And they were interested in finding out what is the innervation of the procerus muscle. So if you look at the top left picture, there's a muscle labeled PM, that stands for procerus muscle. The authors of the paper wanted to know, is the procerus muscle innervated by the frontal temporal branch of the facial nerve, or if not, where is it being innervated? For some reason, it's actually being innervated by the buccal branch, but the buccal branch sends a tiny little branch towards the inner canthus and then towards the procerus muscle. That's being demonstrated by the little horizontal diagonal structure on the top left. If you look at the dissection image on the bottom, you'll see that there's they have an arrow called buccal branch, and that if you trace that arrow, you'll see the very, very fine line ending up with a few black dotted lines towards the letter E. And finally, PM is the procerus muscle. That is an actual very fine branch from the buccal branch of the facial nerve that innervates the procerus muscle. So on the video I'm going to show you here on the right is a needle placed into small intestine 18. The lighting of the video is such that you can only see the handle of the needle. You cannot really see the needle body itself. So it gives you the false impression that the point is more lateral than it is, but the needle itself is pointed into directly underneath the canthus and underneath the zygomatic bone where the textbook location for small intestine 18 ought to be located. And what you're going to see, okay, and when this point is being electrically stimulated, is that in addition to flickering of the upper lips, which is expected for the buccal branch of the facial nerve, you see there's twitching of the eyelid. And if you look at the medial aspect of the eyebrow, okay, the eyebrow is on the left side here of the video, you'll see that there's a subtle depression of the eyebrow on the medial side, and that's the side where the procerus muscle is located. Right. So it shows us that if you have a move in this area here, that the procerus muscle is being activated by virtue of that fine little branch from the buccal nerve. Okay, so I discovered this when I was doing cosmetic acupuncture. I was trying to stimulate not myself, okay, but although nothing wrong with that. I was doing it on some patients of mine, and I was applying electricity because I was trying to stimulate facial muscle tone, and I put a needle in the cheeks, and for some reason I applied stimulation to it, and I was seeing movement in the glabella, in the procerus muscle area, and I didn't know what nerve would allow this to happen, because at the time this information was not known to medical science until that paper came out some years later. But immediately I knew, thankfully I took channel theory in class, I knew, oh, that's got to be the kind of point from small intestine 18 to the inner canthus. So clearly what I have done is I stimulated the channel according to the channel theory. So at least the theory is right, okay, and 99% of the time the channel theory is right. It's just that I had to wait until the research came out that gave me the final missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle that shows you that the channel theory is in fact precise peripheral nervous system. Okay, sorry for that. This is the very last time we're going to do the slide shuffle, and we are going to be finished. Okay, so I'm going to finish with some information on how to use the Pointer Plus device for stimulating motor nerves, and then I'm going to finish with a very quick case. Okay, just I know people always want to know, how do you apply this? So well, I've already talked about how to use this device for finding cutaneous nerve. That was the lung 7 example. Now we want to use this to stimulate motor nerves. So first is the concept of motor inhibition. If you look at the first bullet, okay, motor inhibition is just a fancy term when there's weakness in a particular muscle. So you can do a muscle test For example, a very common one I do every day is have somebody shrug their shoulders to activate the trapezius and levator, and I will look at how it shrugs and how it drops. If one side comes up faster, one side comes up in a jerky motion. And sometimes it comes up fun, but one side drops in a jerky way, whereas the other side doesn't drop in a jerky way. These are all examples that the muscle is inhibited, meaning it's not receiving efficient nerve supply. So that's when we say inhibition, means that the muscle is not receiving proper nerve input. And so this is a great time to use a pointer plus device to provide that electrical input to de-inhibit the muscle. And what's very interesting is that you jump to the very bottom bullet, oftentimes the improvement is immediate. So if you have a muscle that is moving not able to come up, or it's moving in a very jerky way, you stimulate the nerve to that muscle and retest it, immediately it changes, and patients actually they actually know that it has changed. Okay, I always like to sit back and just watch their own reaction. I don't want to say anything, and then they will invariably tell you, "Oh, wow, it's better right away." So when you would use it, now how do you use it? We go back to the intensity setting. Okay, so the intensity setting when it comes to treating nerve trunks, we want to keep it between 1 to 2. So for the cutaneous nerves is 2 to 4. For mixed nerves is 1 to 2. But you'll see that I say in the second bullet, start at 1. Okay, why? Because the nerves are going to innervate a lot of muscles. If you put this very high, it might cause a lot of unwanted contraction and flailing of limbs that's uncomfortable. So start low and then work your way up. And the most important information, the advice I need to give you is that the more proximal you go to the body. Okay, so let's say you have larger nerves, closer to the neck, larger nerve closer to the hip area, as opposed to the hands and feet. The more proximal you are to your trunk, the lower your setting should be. This is why the second bullet you see, I said put the intensity between 0.5 to 1 only. Why? Because those areas are highly innervated and there are a lot of nerve bundles. Just the slightest bit of electricity will cause massive movements that could be disarming, but also, alarming for the patients, but also there's the risk of causing unnecessary discomfort and injury. Okay, so always, this is assume that you place a needle right beside the nerve trunk that you want to stimulate, and you do a quick tap of so you press the button, so the light comes up, it's flashing, so you know it's on, and you do a quick tap. You just make sure that it's not too strong and not causing any unnecessary burning sensation. It is possible to put the needle in a way that that patients only get the motor fascicles without the sensory fascicles. So it might initially be a little burning. Okay, so that's why you do a quick tap, make sure whether it is or not. If it is, move it a little bit deeper, change the angle a little bit, retest it. Now the burning sensation will be gone, and you have just a very clean motor movement, motor activation. And then how do you de-inhibit this or nerve that's weakened? You hold it for 5 to 10 seconds. I put 10 seconds in the slide. Maybe better to put down 5 to 10 seconds. And then you pause for 3 seconds. So I'm holding and the light is coming on, and I'm touching the probe to the needle for 5 seconds. And in the meantime, the electricity going to the nerve trunk, going to the down muscle, and the muscles are contracting rhythmically. Okay, and then I let go, wait for 3 seconds, repeat 3 more times. And depending on how the muscle is changing in its activation and contraction, if I see the contraction is becoming more and more smoother, then I might stop right then and there. If not, I'll do a couple more reps, and then I'll retest. And then immediately, if the muscle was inhibited and weak, it will immediately become strong. Okay? And if it was not firing the coordinated way, it will immediately fire in a coordinated way. Of course, this is a little bit rather simplistic. We need to rule out a possibility there's some spinal involvements, like radiculopathy being the cause of the inhibition, assuming that this is strictly a peripheral problem and not a central problem. It's important to obtain verbal feedback when you're stimulating this. If the patient feels that the muscle is starting to cramp, then back off, obviously. So always let the patient know that if it feels starting to tighten, you need to either reduce the amount of time you're holding that probe to the needle or go at a lower frequency. This basic device is preset at 10 Hertz. There are more higher end models that allows you to switch between 1 to 16 Hertz. So some people prefer, in fact, this particular model also comes in the 4 Hertz. Some people like the lower frequency. Okay, but most of the time I'm using this device as a confirmation tool. Rarely is it a treatment tool like it is shown in this slide. So I really don't play with the frequencies all that much. Okay, and so just to finish up with the second last bullet, you retest, you look to see how efficient the muscles contract. Is the muscle contracting fully? Okay, is the muscle contracting in unison with other muscles around it? So for example, the quadricep, are all the other muscles in the quadricep all firing together, or they're firing independently? This is an excellent tool to re-establish the proper firing of coordinated muscles. So this is the last slide, and we're going to finish up with a little bit of case study. This is a 60-year-old male. Chief complaint is that he has a right wrist pain, which began 4 weeks ago. Okay, so back in 2013, and it began when he started removing staples from a bed frame that he wanted to throw out. Okay, and he was using a screwdriver, which is the kind of repeated. So he didn't have the proper tools, so he was using a screwdriver to pick away the staples, and so obviously there's a lot of repetitive movement, so it looks to me that there was a lot of extension of the wrist. Okay, of course, in this plane where you're kind of using the kind of like scooping a tool, that would be more extensor carpi radialis longus. So I treated that. Okay, but and I did the Cosen's test, which is a test for lepidocondyle, and it was positive. So my impression that this was just a problem that had the wrist extensor involvement. But what was unexpected is that when I palpated the muscles, extensor carpi radialis longus and extensor carpi radialis brevis, there was actually no pain, okay, in this muscle. And certainly no pain in the wrist side of the muscle, which is inconsistent with the patient's chief complaint that there's some wrist pain. So it might be able to explain a little bit of the lateral epicondylitis that's up here, but it doesn't explain the wrist pain that he's really here to see me for. Okay, so but I want to show you how how I made a little mistake, but once I thought about it, I was able to correct my track. So I said to him that I would want to treat him twice a week over 2 weeks' time in 4 treatments. So I started by just targeting the muscles that are the extensor of the wrist. So the points I needled is I needled large intestine 11 and large intestine 8. Why? Because they based on my research, they correspond to specific extensors, longus and brevis. And then I stimulated the nerve supply to that muscle, which can be effective on large intestine 5, which has happened to be the radial nerve that innervates those muscles. And I did distal point at the insertion of these tendons, and the patient came back for the second visit, and unfortunately there was no improvement. Okay, but patient notes that the base of the thumb now also hurts. Okay, so note to self, a patient says that there was no improvement. Okay, but however, based on my experience, the ability to detect a previously undetectable pain usually means there's improvement, because the first pain was now less significant in their mind, that it is now able to focus on a secondary pain. Okay, so but the question is, how is it that he has this pain at the base of the thumb? So then it requires asking, how were you holding that screwdriver as you were removing the staple? Okay, was the thumb placed on top of the tool? And it turned out it was, because the patient was using the thumb to stabilize the screwdriver, and in so doing, okay, he is creating a lot of using his extensors together with his flexors to stabilize that thumb on that tool. So even though the action was just a wrist action, in order to stabilize the tool, he used a lot of his thumb. Then it became aware to me that maybe his pain in the wrist is not in the wrist extensors itself, but in the snuff box tendons of the thumb muscles that also crosses this. So what he effectively had, okay, is a condition called the Corvin's tenosynovitis, and it is a condition that affects the abductor pollicis longus muscle, and as well as the extensor pollicis brevis muscle. Okay, so you can look this up anywhere. The Corvin's tenosynovitis involves those two muscles. So now I know it was wrong. Okay, to stimulate just the wrist extensors. His true problem in his wrist is actually not a wrist extension problem, it's a thumb extensor problem. So remember the video I showed you of Sanjiao 5, 6, 7, 8? I did something like that, okay, and with electricity. And so I'm going to jump to the slide to show you a picture of what that looks like, okay? So what you are seeing, okay, is needles being inserted, okay, into the, unfortunately I don't have a pointer to show it to you. So in this particular picture, you're seeing what the first treatment looked like, focusing wrongly, okay, on the extensions of the wrist. And the right treatment was akin to the video I had shown you when I showed you the movement of the thumb in 3 different planes. And then after that one treatment of the right treatment, the patient came back on the third visit and said that now the condition was 80% improved. So I went from no improvement to then patient improvement in one single treatment, simply because I was able to determine that the problem is the thumb, and then by knowing the anatomy, how to stimulate it and confirm it based on specific movements, obtain the desired result. So in fact, the patient never came back for the 4th visit because the condition was no longer needed any treatments. So that was obviously a very impressive example. You know, day-to-day clinic is not always going to be like that, but I want to show you how understanding anatomy really made a difference for me and how I apply that information in my practice. So just to summarize, all the Jiaijing points, okay, and select portion of the channels are anatomical realities. Okay, so I say select portion of the channels, meaning definitely the lower branches, okay, lower collateral branches, or those dot lines you saw connecting small intestine 8 to the inner canthus. Those are hard anatomical realities. However, classical texts are not infallible, okay, meaning that there are situations where the points, locations, depending how far back you go in Chinese medicine history, the point locations will be different, and certainly they're very different in the way they are disseminated today. Especially we saw the example of editing the pulsation or neurovascular bundle information that the Jiaijing clearly wanted us to know. If you wanted to have very clear intention in how you needle your points, it really helps if you have some understanding of what neuroanatomical structure you're supposed to be affecting, so that you have some idea what depth and angle you need to be going to, so that changes your needle intention. But then by using the electrical stimulation gadget like this, like a point device, you can have a way to actually confirm it. So by knowing anatomy, you can predict what the touchy sensation ought to be. If it's a cutaneous nerve, you'll feel paresthesia in an expected way onto a precise branch. If it's a motor nerve or muscle, it'll recruit and activate or contract in the expected way, and you have a way to confirm that. Okay, and just to drive the point home, based on my research, I have no choice, okay, but to draw the parallel that the anatomical approach to acupuncture is in fact identical to classical acupuncture. So with that, sorry to go over time. It's a bit difficult when you don't have access to a pointer to move things along very quickly, and but I thank you very much for spending your Wednesday night with me. And now, if you're still awake, I'll be very happy to answer any questions that you have.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was incredible. So I know it's late for you, so it's about 10:10 on the East Coast. If you'd like, I can send you the questions. We can email it to the whole audience, or if you'd like, we have about 20 minutes that we can go through and answer questions.
Let's do it. Let's do some questions.
All right, let's get started. Just bear with me 1 second here. All right, so first question was for Riz. When locating the cutaneous nerve with the pointer plus, will this method not work if a water-based lotion is not applied?
It depends on how much moisture content the patient's skin is. If the patient has very dry skin, it will not work. If they're the type of individual that has very clammy skin, it could work without any moisturizer. But in practice, I don't waste time testing things like that. I would just directly apply the moisturizer to the patient if I really needed to have a reason to be very precisely locating a specific branch.
All right, and then Cindy would like to know, with the pointer plus, how do you determine the intensity without zapping the patient?
The intensity there is a range. Okay, so going back to the moisture content, if it has a lot of naturally dry skin, you might need higher intensity on that person versus somebody who has very clammy skin. Maybe when I say 2 to 4 for finding cutaneous nerve, maybe the person with clammy skin just need more on the 2 side. Okay, but when I say 2 to 4, it's actually implied that you've already applied moisturizer. And so you need to keep in mind individual skin moisture content in determining the intensity. But otherwise, it's really just the setting itself. Right? Remembering that when working with cutaneous nerve, start 2 to 4, working mixed nerve trunk, especially the closer you go to a torso, go half, gradually increase to 1. There's always a little bit of, educated guess. And when I mentioned when you touch the first time, do it just a quick tap, don't suddenly sustain it for 10 seconds, right? And not realizing you're doing that. Do a quick tap, get feedback. Just if you do it like that, you don't have to worry about it being too intense for a prolonged period of time that will cause discomfort.
All right, next question. Eric would like to know, what frequencies supplement the point channel and which frequencies drain the point and channel?
That is not an area of my research. There is research that shows you that high frequency manual stimulation appears to sedate the channel. And in fact, by sedation, they mean that it actually promotes the sympathetic nervous system, whereas slow stimulation stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So as you know, basic state that we'd like to be in for health and wellness should be the parasympathetic state. There is a higher model of the pointer plus device that has a plus and minus switch, and it was explained to me that's supposed to, one's supposed to be for vacation, one's supposed to be for sedation. But to be honest, that's not something I play with. I'm usually, when I work with peripheral nerves and these muscles, I use mostly for orthopedic and neuro rehab purposes. For a neuro rehab patient who have very little arm movement or very little sensation, I'm not so worried about tonifying sedation. I'm trying to get them to feel something or move something. As compared to, let's say, I'm using a point for clearing heat, like large intestine 11 or liver 2, for example. Maybe I'll be more conscious about using frequencies that can affect drainage, but I don't apply this information that I do in a tonifying, sedating way. I do use this to inform what kind of sensation I want them to have, and I'll tell them what to expect. So for example, if I'm needling liver 3, I'll tell them, for this point, you could feel some numbness tingling going down to your first web space, foot web space on the big toe and index finger side. And if I elicit that, okay, to me, that's a pat on the back that the job is well done. I created dirty sensation of that specific point.
All right. Next question is, let's see. How do you locate a point with the pointer plus, and how do you know that it is the correct point?
So I don't use the point plus device to locate a point. This is why in the beginning I mentioned I turned the SEN sensitivity off. I know what the two-dimensional locations the point is located because I paid tens of thousands of dollars to TCM colleges to learn that. So I'm immediately going into no more than a thumb, thumb pad area, and if it does require you to learn some anatomy of that point, so going back to large intestine 7, lung 7, for example, knowing that is the superficial branch of radial nerve, I'm going to be moving my thumb around to pluck that nerve structure. So I'm less worried about the exact 1.5 cun from the wrist line, or whether it's on the large intestine side or the lung side. It is where palpate. So it's still true what we learned from our mentors, that palpation is key. And it's true that points can be different location on different person, and it can even move around slightly. And as you can see, the nerve will slide around. So I use the two-dimensional coordinates to inform me where I need to go to palpate, but the final confirmation is if it's a point that's palpable, I have that nerve plucking confirmation. If not, I can use the pointer plus device to check it. And if it's a muscle, such as Sanjiao 5, for example, then I know I'm going to expect index finger extension. That's how I know I got the right point. So the confirmation of the movement, if it's a motor target, it will be how I know it's a point. If it's a sensory target, going back to the lung 7 example, I expect very precise paresthesia into different branches. If I get that, then I know I'm at the right point. So the point is when you've effectively created a unique Dershi response defined as paresthesia or motor movement.
All right, thank you. What are you looking for when you are plucking? What findings mean vacuity and what findings mean repletion?
Okay, so what I'm about to say is simply my personal interpretation. There is such thing as a neurogenic inflammation. So if the nerve is inflamed, when you touch it, it will immediately be painful and cause paresthesia easily. So even if your nerve plucking ability sucks, on a patient who has inflammation, it's very easy to find it. There is also an idea of neuroedema in the Western medicine literature, meaning that certain nerves can swell one side versus the other. So it's conceivable when they're talking about this repletion of acuity, they're talking about the turgor pressure in the nerves, the inflammation in the nerves, and also if the nerve is irritated, it has a lower threshold depolarization, meaning that when you pluck a nerve that's healthy, it shouldn't polarize, but a nerve that is irritated will have paresthesia very easily. So I think that's what they were meaning when they talk about whether it's an excess deficient or repletion deficient vacuous type of nerve, based on palpation as the paragraph is focusing on.
All right, and then looks like Sang Hoon would like to know, does Dai Chi sensation come from needling the actual nerve?
Dai Chi sensation comes from the propagation of the nerve. So you don't have to be on the nerve. In fact, that's not advised. The goal of acupuncture needling is to get Dai Chi sensation, right? So the Dai Chi sensation is certain paresthesia running around meridians or neurovascular bundles. And so you don't have to be actually touching the nerve to create that, but simply be close enough to it and creating a vibration in the needle or with electricity, the electricity will jump into the nerve and cause that propagation for you without even having to be physically and intimately be in contact with the nerve itself.
Okay. Just so you know, we have 10 minutes left, so let's get a few more of these answered. Anything that's unanswered, we will send to you. It's okay, and we can email that out to the whole group if that's okay with you. Next question is, when is your textbook due for publication?
Okay, so I'm about halfway done only because I keep on making new discoveries I want to put in there. So I'm a little bit sidetracked with other research project, but I've very recently started saying no to people that want me to do stuff for them. So I'm just having a one-track mind right now to focus on this book alone, and only this book alone. So other than my teaching obligations that I can't get out of, I'm no longer taking any more responsibility. So I hope to be done by mid-2020. But the book is being submitted to my publisher in chapter form. So they are editing it and they are doing the layout and things like that as it's being completed. So hopefully what that means is that it's not going to take another year from the time I finish the book to it coming out, because they would have presumably been already doing the editing process as I'm completing it already.
Perfect. All right.
So fingers crossed, late next year. Fingers crossed. So I put that word out there now. So now I have to like really try to finish the book now.
All right. And then An would like to know, I noticed the acupoint depleted on the nerve. Are we supposed to needle directly into the nerve or adjacent to the nerve?
I think I answered that question already.
Yeah.
We'll go back and watch the video.
Yes.
Again. Yeah.
All right. And then which needles do you prefer? Heather uses Serins for Japanese technique, which she often uses in her practice. She also uses Wato for E-Stim treatments, but she thinks your needles might be something different.
The needles that I use, first of all, I'm one of those practitioners that use thick gauge needles, so I use 30 gauge needles. Okay, and even on the face. Okay, for me, whether the needle causes pain or not is not so much a function of the gauge or diameter of the needle, is how well you can control the linear trajectory that needle as it's being inserted into the tissue. If you maintain the linearity, it will be very comfortable. But if your technique is not rooted, your fingers are not rooted, or you deviate in your insertion, then you change the vector of that needle, then it starts to bumping into a lot of mechanoreceptors receptors and cause a lot of pain. So in my experience, I have not found thicker needles uncomfortable. I have not found having silicone coating or not to do much to the discomfort. I do some muscle deactivation techniques where I obtain a local twitch response. Some people call that a fasciculation, where I want the muscle to jump, so it's well known among practitioners that do that. Silicone coating makes it more difficult to do that. My go-to length is a 2-inch needle, and because I find that for some deeper nerve structures, I don't want to have to switch between deep and shallow needles. I'd rather just have more needles than I need. I like needles that are very springy. For example, Wato, I find that if I bend it, oftentimes it doesn't return back to its original shape. In some needle techniques, I will actually bend the needle. Let me grab one and show you. So when I'm inserting a needle, it's not necessarily stay straight all the time. I will either put the needle vertically this way, but sometimes I will bend the needle like this. Okay, so holding the shaft and a little bit of the needle body and rotate. So now the handle is actually perpendicular to the needle itself. So in some threading techniques, I'm actually advancing. Okay, my force is actually at a 45, because it actually kind of is the average of these two angles. And so I require a needle to be very pliable to be able to do this, and it's not going to stay in that position once I let go. So I prefer non-copper handles, because I find copper handles more malleable, will stay bent. Other than that, I'm really not a practitioner that's very finicky about needles. Okay, for those criteria, I guess you can say it's pretty finicky. But as long as you give me a thick gauge needle that's like 30 gauge, I'm happy.
All right. All right, one more question, and then we'll send the rest to you afterwards. That's okay with you? Harry would like to know, for a paralyzed eyebrow muscle, which point stimulation is recommended, SI19 or GB14?
Paralyzed eyebrow muscle. So I'm going to venture to guess that this is somebody who has the inability to elevate the eyebrows. And so the action of elevating one's eyebrows is attributed to the frontal temporal branch of the facial nerve. Some literature calls it the frontal branch, sometimes calls it the temporal branch. And this nerve innervates the frontalis muscle. So the facial nerve comes out from syngel 17 behind the earlobe, and it arborizes on the face. The branch that crosses the taiyang, okay, is the one that taiyang point is the one that goes into the frontalis muscle. So when I treat Bell's palsy involving inability to elevate the eyebrow, I'm actually kneeling taiyang point in this direction, and then using the pointer plus device to confirm I'm creating isolated eyebrow elevation. Then I know I really got the nerve that's going to affect the eyebrow. That's my advice for that.
All right. I'm going to send you all of the questions that we didn't get to tonight, and then we're going to email those out to the entire group. I really can't thank you enough, Dr. Poney.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It's been incredible. So again, for everybody who didn't hear me, we are going to be sharing the recording of this. You're going to get it in an email. We're going to share it on our blog afterwards. We do have an email going out that will also have the promo code for upcoming courses that you can see Dr. Poney at, also a promo code for the Pointer Plus. October 9th will be, get the Pointer Plus. On October 9th, we are going to be hosting Lita Herman again for another round of cupping and gua sha. Thank you to everyone who did tonight. Thank you, Dr. Poney, for spending 2 hours with us. This was amazing. Everybody enjoyed it. All right, well, good night, everybody. Good night, Dr. Poney, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.